I knew I was disappearing the day Dylan stood up in the Monday sync and presented my supply chain integration model like he invented duct tape. Even used my exact phrase, pinch point neutralization, the one I scribbled on a napkin during a migraine-fueled brainstorm and later built into a 40-slide deck. The whole room nodded like bobbleheads. No mention of me, not a flicker of acknowledgement, just Dylan in his fresh haircut and confidence cologne, eating up the air like a golden retriever at a meat raffle. And when I raised my hand, just to clarify a technical component, the CEO waved me off with a "let's not derail the vision." Derail the vision. I wish I could say that was the moment I snapped, that I flipped the table or rage posted a resignation letter on LinkedIn. But no, I nodded, I smiled, and I made a mental note to add a new tab to my Amanda's Quiet Fury spreadsheet. Hey, before I go full Shakespearean vengeance on this office soap opera, quick favor. If you're listening and haven't hit subscribe or like the story, maybe tap that little button. Apparently 90% of y'all ghost listen harder than our HR department in harassment training. But seriously, it helps the team keep churning out these tales of workplace dumpster fires. We'd appreciate it. Anyway, back to the fluorescent lit crime scene. You don't spend 5 years eating your lunch over your keyboard and cleaning up everyone else's messes without developing a sixth sense for shifts in energy. First, it was the disappearing invites. Then it was the hey, just looping Dylan in emails about projects I'd originated, followed by the weird looks during meetings, like I was a ghost only visible when a decision needed scapegoating. But I kept showing up, because that's what you do, right? You keep your head down, you polish. You let the louder ones blare the horns while you tighten the bolts that keep the whole thing from collapsing. Back then, I still believed that hard work whispered and truth echoed, that integrity was slow but steady. I genuinely thought, let them talk, let them strut. My work will outlast the noise. But the noise got sharper. Dylan went from supporting my initiatives to owning them. At first, it was subtle. He'd summarize my insights in his status updates, present our shared progress to senior leadership. Once he even copied a chart I hand-built, axis errors and all, and slapped his name on it like he'd discovered gravity. It wasn't just theft, it was erasure. Piece by piece, I was being edited out of the very machine I helped build. I remember sitting at my desk, watching him through the glass, high-fiving a VP over a line I fed him 2 weeks earlier. My inbox pinged with a calendar removal, removed from strategy alignment sync. No note, no explanation. Just like that, I was off the plan I designed. Still, I told myself it was a phase, that leadership would notice, that somewhere in the upper floors of this beige-soled building, someone gave a damn about where good ideas came from. I kept replying to emails with clean grammar and full context. I showed up to meetings early with printouts no one asked for but always used. I even smiled when Dylan said, "Thanks for backing me up in there," like I was his damn sidekick. It didn't fully register until I overheard Janice from HR refer to Dylan as the architect of the expansion blueprint. Architect, as if I'd been the intern handing him coffee while he scribbled the master plan on a cocktail napkin. That night, I stayed late, not out of duty, but paralysis. I sat staring at my screen, watching the cursor blink like it was daring me to type something. I didn't. Instead, I opened the internal archive folder. I started downloading contracts, reading footnotes, clicking into the long-forgotten graveyard of PDF agreements and merger memos. My desk plant was dead. My energy was dying. But somewhere in that digital dust, something was waking up, something old, something I'd signed when no one else wanted to. Formality at the time. A single clause, long buried, that suddenly felt warm in my hand. Dylan thought he was building his empire on my silence. He didn't know I'd been quietly drawing the blueprint for his collapse, and I wasn't done yet. The first time Dylan showed up to a director-level only meeting, he walked in like he'd been born there. I'd been prepping for that meeting for weeks, lining up competitive analysis, coordinating input from ops, even babysitting 2 VPs through their ego wars over jurisdiction. It was my meeting, my show. And yet there he was. No agenda, no invite, just a fresh cup of coffee and a "heard this was where the real decisions happened" smirk. I glanced at Marcia from finance, expecting at least a raised eyebrow. Nothing, not even a blink. The meeting started, and halfway through, Dylan leaned forward, adjusted his lapel like he was auditioning for the role of executive's favorite, and repeated something I'd said verbatim in a Slack thread 2 days prior. What we need is seamless cross-functional integration through modular handoffs. They nodded like he'd just decoded the genome. That sentence came from a doc I wrote, titled Cross-Functional Strategy Notes Amanda. But no one looked at me. No one said, "Didn't Amanda already bring that up?" By the time the VP clapped Dylan on the back and said, "Glad you're thinking long-term," I felt something shift, not just in the room but in the entire axis of my career. Dylan wasn't helping, he was replacing, slowly, incrementally, with the smile of a golden boy and the ethics of a rental scam. After the meeting, he turned to me in the hallway like we were best friends again. "Hey, thanks for laying the groundwork for that convo. Super helpful." I said nothing, just nodded. He added, "You've always been good at the details." Translation, I'm the paint roller. He's the artist. That week, 3 of my recurring strategy meetings disappeared from my calendar. One got reassigned to Dylan. Another was merged with a cross-team sync I wasn't included in. The third just vanished. When I asked HR, they smiled like I was asking about office donuts. Leadership is just experimenting with org dynamics right now. Nothing permanent, except I wasn't imagining it. My project briefs started showing up in slide decks, but the title slide had Dylan's name slapped on top. My phrasing, my formatting, even my typo in infrastructure carried over. I stared at one deck during an internal review and felt my stomach turn. He'd used my closing line, let's not just scale, let's evolve. And there he was, standing at the front, hands in his pockets like a tech messiah, letting the room drink it in. I sat 2 rows back. I didn't speak. I watched. What scared me most wasn't that no one noticed. It was that no one cared. There's this moment in every woman's career when you stop hoping they'll see your effort and start realizing they already did, and chose to give credit elsewhere. I'd been the reliable one, the fixer, the closer, the let's ask Amanda safety net. But now I was a shadow, a reference point, a cautionary tale of what happens when you assume meritocracy is bulletproof. One morning, I found Dylan already at my desk, sitting, drinking my damn tea. Hope you don't mind, I needed a quiet space to finish the grant narrative. My grant, the one I spent months aligning across departments, the one that launched this whole expansion plan. I'll forward you the final draft to review, he added. Not right, review, like I was some tired editor in a dusty backroom. I stared at him. I wanted to say, get out of my chair, but I didn't, because now I was starting to understand. This wasn't just ego, it was strategic. Someone somewhere had greenlit this. That week, our department lead stopped CCing me on major threads. I'd write detailed analysis, and Dylan would present it as his reflections. HR started holding coffee chats with me, soft-voiced ones, with phrases like, have you thought about transitioning into more of a mentorship role? Mentorship. Translation, move aside gracefully while we parade the new mascot. The air was changing. People stopped making eye contact when I walked into meetings. I overheard someone say, didn't Dylan build that whole framework from scratch? I didn't correct them. I stopped speaking unless it was absolutely necessary. I watched. I took screenshots. I exported agendas. I marked every meeting change in a private calendar called Erasure. And one night, sitting at my desk while everyone else left for happy hour, I opened an old shared drive from the year of the acquisition. Just on a whim, what I found didn't mean anything at first, just an archived folder titled Restructure Legal Review. But it was the first breadcrumb. And once I clicked, I stopped seeing myself as the victim. I started seeing myself as the trap. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, I was looking for a stapler. That's it. Supply cabinet by the break room was out, and I figured Dylan wouldn't notice me stepping into the empty conference room next to his. His door was cracked, and my name floated out like it had been chewed and spit into a trash can. Yeah, we'll sunset her involvement post Q4. She's legacy baggage, he said, with a chuckle that sounded like it had never done a day of real work in its life. Clean break, clean branding. The board doesn't want any of the old. Just forward motion. A pause, then more poison. It's my vision now. Cross-channel consolidation initiative, streamlined, modern, investor safe. We'll loop her in as a technical resource if needed, but the face of the plan has to shift. I stood there, blinking at a dried coffee spill on the floor like it could somehow explain what I'd just heard. Legacy baggage. That's what I'd become after 5 years of dragging this company's half-dead ideas across the finish line, resuscitating botched timelines, and swallowing every condescending "you're so good with logistics" from men who still didn't know what cross-functional actually meant. I didn't storm in. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I just turned, stapler forgotten, and walked back to my desk like my ribcage wasn't shaking. When I sat down, Dylan's laptop was still open on the desk next to mine, and there it was. On his screen, Cross-Channel Consolidation Initiative Draft 2. I clicked it open with one pinky like I was touching a dead rat. It was my structure. My slides, my pain points, my calendar from the Q2 whiteboard strategy session, copied down to the typo I never corrected in the title, infrastructure. He'd rebranded my plan, slapped a buzzword on it, stripped out the nuance, and stuck a bow on it. I closed the tab, and I smiled. That's when it clicked. They were rewriting the story while I was still breathing. But stories have receipts. So I opened my email, started digging through sent folders from 2 years back, pulled anything tagged contract, merger, or compliance. I requested PDFs from legal just for my records, threw in a few. I think we lost this during the system migration lies. Nobody questioned it. No one notices the woman in the corner quietly organizing her downfall like she's sorting recyclables. I made a spreadsheet with 3 columns. Initiative name, original, version now circulating, Dylan's title, source document / author, me, always me. I found 17 initiatives. 17 of my projects that had been neutered, rewrapped, and funneled into Dylan's strategy deck. I even found one where he'd reused a visual I hand-sketched on a whiteboard, the supply loop infinity model. He just changed the colors, called it the Dylan loop. The Dylan loop. I nearly bit through my cheek laughing. By Thursday, I had 64 PDFs and 22 Word docs stashed in a private cloud folder titled Insurance. The rage didn't disappear. It calcified. It sat inside me like a brick in warm cement, but it stopped screaming. That weekend, I went hiking. No service. Just trees and silence and the slow crawl of my heart adjusting to a new rhythm. Don't fight them yet. Let them build the gallows. Monday morning, Dylan swaggered into our bullpen with a grin and a cold brew that smelled like vanilla body spray and stolen credit. Big meeting tomorrow, he said, tossing me a wink like we were still co-authors of the same future. Can you prep the pre-read? Sure, I said. Want me to include the timeline of original inputs too? He paused, confused. I smiled wider. He nodded slowly. Yeah, great. Just keep it high level. No need to go too deep. Oh, Dylan, we're already way past shallow. That night, I printed something new, not a project brief, not a workflow diagram. I printed a contract from 2019. One line highlighted in neon yellow. Clause 14.5.3. In absence of a successor designation, product IP originating under assigned lead defaults to originating lead's authority for external application. The originating lead? Me. Not Dylan, not the face of the future. Just the legacy baggage they forgot had teeth. And tomorrow, I'd start packing the rope. The folder wasn't even locked. That's the part that still makes me laugh. All that posturing, all that executive swagger, and the most explosive clause in the company's strategic foundation was just sitting there, in a subfolder marked Legacy Compliance Archive Final. God bless the interns who don't know how to clean a drive. I'd started looking late one Friday night, lights humming overhead like a warning I couldn't hear yet. I had one headphone in, some white noise app playing, because silence had started to sound too much like defeat. The building was empty, except for the janitor 2 floors up, and whatever ghost of myself I was slowly resuscitating. The file was from a restructuring initiative in 2019, back when we acquired a sputtering logistics firm called Norem Connect. I remembered it because I was the only one who read the full merger packet while everyone else played ping pong and acted like we'd just conquered Rome. I'd been lead on the asset integration, mapping IP transfer, documentation, project handoffs, back-end systems, all of it. It was thankless work. No bonus. No title bump. Just I couldn't have done it without you speech from a VP who now doesn't remember my last name. I clicked through the original documentation out of habit more than anything, looking for a scrap of power, a mistake I could weaponize. Halfway through the third PDF, I saw it. Clause 14.5.3 IP transfer authority in absence of a successor designation. Product IP originating under assigned lead defaults to originating lead's approval for external application. And there it was. In one long, clunky sentence, the noose. That clause meant that every single system blueprint, infrastructure draft, and logistical flowchart consolidated under that merger, and later rolled into our current expansion plan, was still under my authority. No one had ever removed me from the signatory role. No one had updated the successor list. They'd all assumed the clause was boilerplate. That assigned lead was just a title, not a loaded gun. They were wrong. I read it 4 times. Not because I didn't believe it, but because it felt too good to be true. Then I opened the metadata. Last modified, June 2019. Signatories, me, successor line, blank. I printed it. Highlighted clause 14.5.3 in a soft gold marker. Not yellow, gold, just for me. Then I slid the paper into a plain manila folder, scrawled lunch notes across the front in Sharpie, and tucked it into the back of my filing drawer behind some dusty performance reviews no one ever read. That night, I didn't sleep, not out of fear, out of clarity. Because once you see the edge of the blade, you start to picture how to turn it. Monday came with a new kind of stillness. I wasn't hustling anymore. I wasn't trying to win favor or earn praise. I was just observing. The office felt like a chessboard mid-game. Everyone still thought I was the pawn, but I held the queen in my drawer. I started laying groundwork. Casually, quietly. I asked one of the junior legal assistants if they had old email chains from the merger year, claimed I needed a reference point for a process improvement project. They didn't question it, forwarded me a zip file without blinking. I dropped by IT and made light conversation about access logs and legacy system protocols. Wondered aloud if we still tracked document-level edit permissions on archived SharePoint nodes. Just curious, I said, doing a little cleanup. Meanwhile, Dylan strutted through the floor like a man mid-victory lap. He slapped a sticky note on my monitor one morning that read, "Make sure the investor deck matches the tone of our strategy." Our strategy. I smiled and stuck the note to the bottom of my coffee mug like a coaster. Every time he paraded past my desk, every time he sent a meeting recap written in the passive voice to bury my input, every time he forgot to loop me in, I added another line to a private log I titled for the record. Dates, times, screenshots, not dramatic, just enough to paint a picture. I even complimented him one day, said I was impressed by his ability to amplify existing ideas. He beamed, didn't even catch the insult. That's the thing about people like Dylan. They think strategy is about being seen, but real leverage lives in silence. in fine print, in clause 14.5.3. The deeper I went, the more I saw how much of their expansion fantasy still rested on frameworks I authored. How none of it, not the logistics pipeline, not the supplier redundancy grid, not even the comms tree, could function without the backbone I built during a 2-week stretch while my appendix was infected and my cat was dying. No one thanked me then, but I wasn't looking for thanks anymore. I was looking for the cleanest way to collapse their fantasy without ever raising my voice, and I'd just found it. The champagne wasn't even cold. They rolled in a cart of lukewarm bottles and stacked flutes like this was some kind of coronation. Dylan stood in the middle of the room like he'd just invented electricity, accepting every backpat and brilliant positioning comment like they were carved in marble. I stood off to the side, holding a tray of cupcakes I'd baked the night before, dark chocolate with sea salt, his favorite. Not because I care, because I wanted everyone to remember the taste when the ship sank. The CEO clinked his glass like he was announcing a royal birth. To Dylan, he said, lifting his flute with both smugness and ignorance for pulling us into the next era. And to Amanda, he turned to me, smiling that tight, executive smile that always precedes a knife in the ribs, for being such a team player. Takes real maturity to step back and let great ideas lead. Great ideas. Let lead. There was a ripple of polite laughter. I smiled, bit into a cupcake, swallowed salt and sugar and the rising bile of watching them praise a man for stealing what I bled to build. I excused myself early, said I had a client call. No one cared. Back at my desk, I opened a blank email. Subject, Notice of Signatory Rights Retention Clause 14.5.3. I typed the rest slowly, like each word was a pressure point. I explained the clause. I cited the file path. I noted that no successor had been designated. I included timestamps of my authorship on the original frameworks now integrated into Dylan's expansion plan. I referenced the IP continuity policy from the 2020 audit. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't a threat. It was a fuse, soaked and waiting. When I finished, I saved it as a draft and exported a PDF copy to a private cloud folder named Contingency Ignite. Then I took a walk. The office was still buzzing from the pre-launch glow. Dylan was laughing somewhere near the glass conference room, his voice always 2 octaves too loud when he was being fake humble. It's just collaboration, man, he was saying. We're all in this together. Of course we are. I walked past HR. The same HR that had once pulled me aside to suggest I soften my tone when correcting male colleagues in meetings. They were the ones who told me to be patient with Dylan. He's still finding his footing. Now they were decorating his desk with a gold star balloon that read visionary. When I got back to my desk, I stared at the draft email again. My cursor hovered over send. My finger itched, but I didn't press it. Not yet. There's a moment right before you break something when you just wait. Not because you doubt it, but because you know the exact second of impact is the only thing they'll remember. Timing is everything when you're laying a minefield. And I wanted the boom to be heard on every floor. Instead, I shut my laptop and pulled the folder labeled lunch notes from my drawer. Opened it. Reread clause 14.5.3 again. Memorized every comma. Outside, the sun was setting like nothing was wrong. Inside, I felt the bitter pleasure of a woman who has stopped asking for fairness and started calculating consequences. Let them toast. Let them print the decks and rehearse their speeches. I think I'm icing cupcakes. I'm icing a trigger. I started with the system logs, buried behind 6 layers of SharePoint sludge and permissions menus that haven't been updated since the Obama administration. The legacy signatory matrix still existed. I only found it because I remembered a shortcut from when I helped onboard a former VP who couldn't figure out how to open PDFs without printing them first. That shortcut led me to the old sign-off registry, the one tied to the NORAM acquisition, and there it was. My name, Amanda L. Fordham, still listed under Authorized Infrastructure IP Signatory. No successor, no expiration date. No one had thought to close the loop. I scrolled down just to make sure. Dylan's name was nowhere on the list. He wasn't even in the system back then. He was still in grad school, probably giving LinkedIn TED monologues about synergy to girls on Hinge. I printed the registry page and added it to the lunch notes folder. Then I made a copy for a separate folder labeled Insurance Phase 2. That same afternoon, I dropped by legal. Not with guns blazing, just a casual drop-in. Our junior in-house counsel, Reggie, was grabbing coffee, and I timed my approach perfectly. Hey, random question, I said, smiling like I didn't have a dossier of nuclear receipts in my bag. You remember that old NORAM IP protocol doc? The one with all those weird clause numbers? 14 point something? He blinked. Vaguely. Yeah, no worries. Just trying to make sure my ducks are in a row. I think I was still technically listed as the IP signatory during that integration, and I came across something that made me wonder if we ever filed the successor form. You'd remember that, right? He looked uncertain, but nodded like someone trying to remember if they left the stove on. You might be right. No one ever really closed that book. Why, oh, nothing, just cleaning house, getting ahead of questions, you know? Dylan's been asking a lot of questions about the infrastructure timeline. Figured I'd be proactive. I let that hang in the air like a perfume laced with gunpowder. Planted the seed, watered it, walked away. Reggie stared into his coffee for a solid 3 seconds before heading back to his desk. Later that week, Dylan made a comment in the break room that confirmed just how high on his own supply he'd gotten. "Hope you don't mind I stole your thunder," he said with a grin while the marketing coordinator laughed too hard beside him. "You built the bones, I just gave it muscle." I sipped my tea. Thunder's just air pressure. It comes back around eventually. He blinked, probably trying to decide if that was a threat or a haiku. I didn't care, because at that point I wasn't even angry anymore. I was detached, like watching someone brag about their dream home while I quietly held the deed. The thing about Dylan was that he couldn't stop poking. He wanted me to snap. Wanted me to call him out in a meeting, to scream in the middle of the floor so he could play the role of the calm, collected future exec while I got labeled emotional. But I'd moved past the need for noise. I was already outside the blast radius, prepping the wires. That week, I started replying to threads with surgical precision, one-word acknowledgments, no emotion, just timestamps and deliverables. I copied key people quietly. I avoided meetings where I wasn't required and let Dylan bask alone in the sun lamp of his own ego. Meanwhile, I sent one more email. This one to the old compliance officer from NORAM. Just a simple, "Hey, hope you're well, quick question about the IP handoff process we finalized during the merger. Do you remember if the original approval protocol required physical signature updates or just digital?" He replied within an hour. "Hey Amanda, pretty sure it required both. Can't imagine anyone updated that without documentation." "Why? Something wrong?" I didn't answer. Instead, I saved the email as PDF #88 in the insurance folder. Let Dylan keep running victory laps. He was on the track I designed, wearing my jersey and sprinting straight toward a cliff, and I wasn't going to stop him. I was just going to be there when the ground gave out, holding the one page he never bothered to read. The conference room smelled like ego and printer toner. It was final review day, what Dylan dubbed the crown jewel presentation. The expansion plan was printed in full-color gloss, spiral-bound and stacked neatly at every seat like some kind of preemptive eulogy for my relevance. The room buzzed with that artificial anticipation executives love to bathe in, half caffeine, half groupthink. Someone even brought in branded pastries shaped like our logo. I didn't touch them. I'd already eaten. Dylan was already at the front, sleeves rolled up like he'd personally hand-laid the fiber cables. He paced with the energy of a golden retriever on Adderall, gesturing at a slide titled "The Future is Now" while legal, finance, and the CEO sipped their coffees and let him soak in his own reflected spotlight. I sat 2 seats down from legal, folder in my lap. Just another silent passenger on the Dylan Express. He clicked to the next slide. "Before we dive in, I just want to say, this plan took collaboration, vision, and a willingness to challenge outdated models." He looked right at me. Too bad none of Amanda's ideas made the cut. There it was, the jab, delivered with a smile. Everyone chuckled politely. The CEO, never one to miss an opportunity for smug unity, leaned back in his chair and chimed in, "Maybe she's keeping secrets." I smiled, not wide, not sweet. "Surgical, just one," I said, and then I reached into my bag and pulled out a plain manila envelope, creased once, sealed with a strip of red tape, and placed it gently in front of corporate counsel like I was sliding a tip to a blackjack dealer. No one blinked, not at first. Dylan kept talking. I think he said something about omnichannel replatforming. I didn't hear it, I just stared at the envelope. The folder had weight, not in ounces, but in pressure. Inside was a printed copy of Clause 14.5.3, the digital signatory record, data logs, a screenshot of the untouched successor field, the email from NORAM's compliance officer confirming the clause was still active, and the kicker, a timestamp notice of intention to invoke IP signature rights, filed but unsent. Until now, I didn't look at legal. I didn't need to. A few more slides passed. The room clapped as Dylan showed projections for Q3 scaling, blissfully unaware that the very blueprint they were celebrating was currently in dispute. That's the thing about corporate rituals, they're all theater. You can bring down a building just by pulling the right thread on the curtain, and I had pulled it. I watched the counsel finally notice the envelope. He raised an eyebrow, opened it, started reading. The shift in his posture was microscopic, but I caught it, his back straightened by 3 degrees. His fingers stopped tapping. His brow creased at clause 14.5.3 like it had just whispered something indecent in his ear. Dylan was still blabbering. "This initiative represents a clean break from legacy inefficiencies, streamlining integration, solidifying our supply chain dominance." The lawyer turned one page, then another. I crossed my legs, didn't say a word. The room kept moving like a merry-go-round, unaware that one bolt had already popped. Dylan hit the final slide. "Any questions?" he asked like he'd just delivered the 10 Commandments. There was a pause, and then, "Can we hold for a moment?" The lawyer said, quietly but firmly. Silence, that thin, shimmering kind of silence that means someone important just realized they forgot to wear pants to the meeting. I didn't gloat, I didn't move. I just tilted my head and said calmly, "You might want to read all of it. There's a postscript." The CEO reached for the folder. Legal stopped him with a hand. "Let me finish first." Across the table, Dylan looked at me, brows knit, confusion blooming like a rash. I smiled again. "It's just a little continuity housekeeping," I said. "You know, legacy baggage and all." Tension had unspooled beneath the table like exposed wiring, and the match was already lit. Any second now it was going to hit oil. The room didn't explode. It imploded. Lawyer's eyes froze halfway down page 3 like he'd just spotted a shark fin in a kiddie pool. The red Sharpie highlight on clause 14.5.3 glared up at him like a bloodstain. His lips parted slightly. Not to speak, just to breathe differently. Then he leaned toward the CEO and whispered, not as a joke, not even as a warning, just a quiet plea for reality to rewrite itself. "Tell me this is a joke." The CEO blinked. What? Lawyer didn't repeat himself. Instead, he cleared his throat and said aloud, because silence had stretched too long, "She's the signatory." He tapped the clause with one stiff finger. "This entire expansion plan, including all derivatives based on the NORAM infrastructure consolidation, requires her signature. Or it's null. All of it." The air died in that room. No one moved, no one spoke. The VP of Finance stopped mid-sip, coffee halfway to his lips. The operations lead, who'd been nodding along like a bobblehead for the past hour, suddenly looked like she might be sick. Dylan's smile slipped off his face like someone had unplugged it from the wall. He looked around, then back at me. Confused, pale, a single bead of sweat on his temple that hadn't been there a moment ago. What is this?" he asked, voice barely tethered to his breath. I didn't answer him. I wasn't here to explain. I stood slowly, not with drama, but with certainty. Like gravity had shifted in my favor for the first time in months. Like the floor finally remembered it owed me something. "I assumed you read the fine print," I said, calm as a lake before a storm. "You've been building your little monument on my foundation. Problem is, I still own the land." I turned to the CEO. "You authorized this initiative without validating IP continuity. That's a legal risk, a big one." The CEO looked at legal, then back at me. "This can't be right," but the lawyer cut him off, voice firmer now, volume rising just enough to draw every head toward the end of the table. "It's right. This clause is binding unless a successor was formally filed and co-signed by the originating lead. That never happened. We have no documentation." He gestured to the printout. "And there's digital evidence she was never replaced." He looked at me, this time not as a footnote or an inconvenience, but as what I'd always been, a gatekeeper. Dylan made a small, sputtering sound like his throat forgot how to form words. You can't just, this was my plan." I tilted my head. "Your plan is built on my work, my documentation, my frameworks, my signature." I tapped the envelope. "Without it, all you've got is a PowerPoint and a dream." The tension swelled like a balloon someone forgot to stop inflating. No one touched the celebratory pastries. Projector light flickered across Dylan's pale face like he was trapped in a hostage video. The CEO finally exhaled. "Amanda, can we discuss this?" I nodded. "Sure, I'm open to negotiation." Then I turned toward the door, no speech, no mic drop, just the quiet sound of heels on carpet and a chair creaking as I stepped away from the table. Behind me, the lawyer flipped to the final page and read the postscript aloud. "Notice of retention filed. Timestamped, unrevoked, rights enforceable effective immediately." The room didn't breathe, and I didn't look back. I didn't rush. I walked back in with my bag on one shoulder, calm as a cat in a birdcage full of open doors. The tension hadn't moved. It was still there, clinging to the windows, the ceiling tiles, the corners of Dylan's jaw. The legal team was already elbow-deep in clause cross-references and digital timestamp verification, whispering like a group of priests discovering they'd been quoting the wrong gospel for years. The CEO looked up as I returned. "Amanda, listen, there's no need for ultimatums. Let's all stay constructive here." I set my bag gently on the table, unzipped the side pocket, and pulled out one more folder, this one crisp, white, labeled nothing. "I'll consider signing," I said, voice flat but steady. "But I have a few amendments." The room twitched. Dylan opened his mouth, thought better of it, closed it again. His pupils darted toward the legal counsel like maybe, somehow, a last-minute rescue was en route, but it wasn't. There would be no cavalry, no pivot slide, no synergistic realignment. I slid the single page across the table like it was an appetizer menu. 3 lines, no fluff, just facts. Back pay credit for all strategic development work tied to NORAM IP structures, dating to June 2019. Public acknowledgement in internal and external strategy communications of original authorship and ownership. Formal reassignment of plan leadership in system records and board minutes. I didn't add an apology. I didn't need one. I wasn't here for their redemption. "You have until Friday," I said, zipping the bag shut again. "Or I let the investors know you've breached IP continuity and executed a go-to-market strategy built on unapproved transfers." Legal looked at the CEO. The CEO looked like someone just hit his kneecaps with a baseball bat. "Friday," I repeated. 5 p.m. Pacific. Dylan finally spoke. His voice cracked halfway through. "You're going to blow up the entire launch over ego?" I turned to him. No smile this time, just stillness. "You repackaged my lungs and called it your breath." This isn't about ego, it's about ownership, and yours doesn't exist. His mouth stayed open a little too long, like he wanted to protest but had forgotten what protest sounded like. I picked up the lunch notes folder, still marked in Sharpie, still warm with the weight of consequences, and tucked it under my arm. No more meetings, no more polite nods, no more email trails where I politely reminded people I'd already submitted the deliverable 2 weeks ago. I walked out without saying goodbye. Behind me, no one stood. The only sound was the lawyer whispering to someone on the phone, trying to find precedent where none existed. The CEO rubbed his temples like the pressure was physical. Dylan didn't move. I paused for one last look. The boardroom was frozen. The white folder lay open like a wound, and Dylan's hand trembled near a glass of untouched champagne, his name etched on the flute, the bubbles already dying. By the time the clock hit 5 that day, the only thing left echoing in that room was the silence I'd taught them to fear. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.